Chapter 2896, Primordial Ruin. Chapter 2896, Primordial Ruin. A primordial ruin? Shifeng's interest was piqued when he heard the words primordial ruin. Ruins were commonly found in secret lands, and they could be differentiated into ancient ruins and primordial ruins, depending on their era of creation. Of the two, primordial ruins were much rarer because they predated ancient ruins, and the ancient era's residents had already explored and dismantled many of them. Primordial ruins that managed to last until the modern era were as rare as legendary items. Meanwhile, the primordial era was a time when gods flourished and ancient gods still wandered the land. With luck, one might even come across an item left behind by an ancient god inside a primordial ruin. "Where are you?" Shifeng asked through the team chat. "A canyon stream in the south. There are many evil blood soldiers wandering here, probably more than 3,000. They seem to be guarding that primordial ruin," Fire Dance reported quietly as she observed the patrolling evil blood soldiers around her. "I also saw quite a few level 160+ superior mythic-ranked evil blood priests walk into the ruin just now. I suspect they'll conduct some kind of ritual inside. However, the place is heavily guarded, so it'll be difficult for us to sneak into the ruin. The only way we can enter is by breaking through from the front." Over 3,000 evil blood soldiers? Shifeng frowned. If their opponents consisted of only several hundred evil blood soldiers, their team could still secure victory under his leadership. However, 3,000 evil blood soldiers was a number even he couldn't stop. Not to mention, there were bound to be many superior mythics as well. Even if he could withstand their assault, the others on his team couldn't. After all, these evil blood monsters weren't idiots. If all 3,000 evil blood soldiers used their Tier 4 skills simultaneously, even Shifeng wouldn't dare take them head-on. He would have to evade their attacks and kite them. After all, a Tier 5 player would still take significant damage if a Tier 4 mythic monster's attack struck him. Naturally, it would be even more impossible for Tier 4 players to dodge and block so many Tier 4 skills. It wouldn't matter even if a Tier 4 player were at the world creation standard. This was because mythic monsters could keep up with the speed of Tier 4 players, and thus could precisely aim and time their attacks. Let alone hundreds or thousands, just a few dozen evil blood soldiers working together would be more than enough to take down a Tier 4 metric tons at the world creation standard. A team would need at least 3 or 4 Tier 5 players to take on 3,000 mythic-ranked evil blood soldiers adequately. Relying only on one Tier 5 player and several dozen Tier 4 players was simply impossible. Such a team would have to expend all its efforts just dodging and blocking the Tier 4 skills and spells of the mythic monsters. In other words, while Zero Wings' team could defend itself against the army of evil blood monsters, it had no chance of defeating the army. "Guild leader, how about we take them on in batches?" Cold Shadow suggested. "Those soldiers might be numerous, but they aren't grouped up closely. It'll take some time for all of them to gather at a single point. We can use this time to kill some of them and retreat once their combatants have gathered. With sufficient repetition, those soldiers are bound to fall." After listening to Cold Shadow's suggestion, Shifeng shook his head and said, "That is one way to do it. However, that assumes that the other side doesn't have any healers. Those evil blood priests are all capable of healing. Moreover, as superior mythics, their healing range should be massive. If I'm not mistaken, the soldiers are patrolling within the healing range of the priests. Once we attack the soldiers, the priests will heal the injured soldiers immediately. Unless we can one-shot those soldiers, there is no way we can out-damage a superior mythic's healing." Cold Shadow fell silent at Shifeng's words. Choosing to kill the evil blood soldiers or the evil blood priests first didn't matter. Neither was a viable option. The evil blood priests' healing capabilities were simply too powerful. If the team didn't have the strength to kill several evil blood priests instantaneously and simultaneously, they couldn't deal with so many evil blood monsters. "Are we going to give up, just like that?" White Feather grew anxious. "That's a primordial ruin we're talking about. Even mythology had never found a primordial ruin. It had only ever explored ancient ruins. Even so, the guild had still reaped significant harvests from those ruins, particularly regarding the improvement of the mana body. Those harvests were the reason mythology's old monsters managed to develop their mana bodies so quickly. Meanwhile, a primordial ruin was far more precious than an ancient ruin. It wouldn't be strange if it contained treasures that could help players reach Tier 5 more easily. After all, primordial ruins dated from the era of the ancient gods. The legacies left behind in these ruins would be far superior to the legacies created during ancient and modern times. We're not completely out of options. After giving the matter some thought, Shifeng said, however, this will be very risky. We might even suffer a team wipe. All secret lands had entrance limits. Depending on a secret land's rank, the entrance limit imposed on players would also differ. In the case of God mode secret lands, players could enter only once every 10 days. If a player team suffered annihilation, they would be resurrected outside the secret land and would have to wait 10 days to re-challenge it. Meanwhile, the team's significant harvest in the evil god's secret land meant they didn't have to risk their lives for a primordial ruin. They could just continue hunting in safer parts of the secret land and raising their strength. Upon hearing Shifeng's statement, Cold Shadow asked curiously, Guild leader, how confident are you? Roughly 30%, Shifeng said. Of course, that's assuming nothing unexpected happens inside the ruin. 30. Cold Shadow did a double take at Shifeng. This was already a very high success rate considering their opponents consisted of 3,000 plus evil blood soldiers and priests. She then said, I think we can give it a try. While it would indeed be unfortunate if we failed, in our current state, achieving further qualitative improvements in the evil god's secret land would be difficult unless we venture deeper into the inner region. However, there should be plenty of Tier 5 legendary monsters roaming there, and we don't know if we can defeat such a monster. Rather than take our chances against a legendary monster, we might as well risk our lives for a primordial ruin. It'll be a huge jackpot for us if we succeed. Tier 5 legendary monsters weren't easy opponents to defeat even if they had a Tier 5 player on their team, just like how Tier 4 players had great difficulty soloing a Tier 4 mythic monster. Moreover, a fight with a legendary monster inside the evil god's secret land would easily attract more legendary monsters. If 2 legendary monsters appeared, a team wipe was all but guaranteed. Only Shifeng might escape alive. When Blackie, Cola, and the others heard Cold Shadow's reasoning, they, too, nodded in agreement. Their team's equipment standard had improved by leaps and bounds already, and further significant improvements would be difficult within a short time. Only 8-piece level 180 epic sets and fragmented legendary items could provide them with such improvements. Upgrading fragmented legendary items into legendary items was also highly dependent on luck, as not every fragmented legendary item needed only god crystals for their upgrade. Not to mention, the drop rate of god crystals was completely random. These weren't items that could be obtained on demand. Since you all see no problem with it, let's give it a try, then, Shifeng said when he saw everyone's willingness to risk their lives. Entering the primordial ruin is actually a very straightforward process. I just need someone to attract the evil blood monster's attention. So long as a sufficient number of them get lured away, I will be able to enter the ruin. However, you must also make sure to pin down those lured monsters. Otherwise, if they flood into the ruin after me, I won't be able to do anything. Leave it to us, guild leader, Cola said, confidently patting his chest. If we 4 MTS take turns using our mock skills and life-saving skills, we can keep them busy for 5 minutes without any problem. We magical classes can also use our magic barriers to trap those monsters for some time, Zhao Yueru said, nodding. After hearing everyone's suggestions, Shifeng nodded and said, all right, I'll leave it to you. I'll try to explore the ruin as quickly as possible. When Shifeng finished speaking, Fire Dance, Cold Shadow, and Yang Tianxing split up, moving in different directions. The 3 assassins attracted the evil blood soldiers' attention and lured them toward the appointed location. However, after attracting the attention of a certain number of evil blood soldiers, the 3 assassins had to activate their berserk skills and all sorts of life-saving skills to stay alive. Fortunately, they eventually succeeded in luring over 70% of the evil blood soldiers to the appointed location. There, Cola, Yi Wumian, Turtle Dove, and White Feather used their mock skills on the lured evil blood soldiers, forcefully shifting the monster's aggro to themselves. The 4 MTS then activated their life-saving skills and began kiting and dodging the monster's attacks. The healers standing in the distance also showered healing spells on the 4 MTS, repeatedly dragging them back from the jaws of death. Once the 4 MTS had the evil blood soldiers pinned down, Shifeng, who was hiding near the primordial ruin, entered the void and dashed toward the ruin. With the Nightwalker's cape's ability, Shifeng could cross several hundred yards with just one step. As if he had activated instantaneous movement several times consecutively, he crossed a distance of several thousand yards in just 2 seconds and arrived at the primordial ruin's entrance. And before the evil blood monsters standing guard there could react to his arrival, he had already dashed inside. The instant Shifeng entered the primordial ruin, the evil blood monsters in the vicinity went into a frenzy and swarmed toward him. The several evil blood priests kneeling inside the ruin's main hall also began chanting incantations and bombarded Shifeng with tier 4 curses, one after another. However, now that Shifeng possessed a piece of legendary equipment, this degree of offensive was nothing to him. He easily evaded the oncoming attacks. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared from the main hall and entered the tunnel leading underground. Although he came across various magic traps along the way, they were practically non-existent to him, as he was a Grandmaster magician. In less than a minute, Shifeng arrived in the primordial ruin's deepest section. The deepest part of the ruin was like an empty void. A majestic, ancient temple stood in this void. Despite the corrosion of countless years, the temple still radiated an unbelievably powerful divine might. If Shifeng had come here before reaching Tier 5, he wouldn't have been able to withstand this divine might. What a powerful temple! If I hadn't upgraded the Nightwalker's cape to legendary rank, its divine might would have had a significant effect on me. Shifeng was astonished as he looked at the temple before him. The Nightwalker's cape didn't just hide his aura. It also functioned to resist the auras of others. It acted as an isolation barrier that prevented the user's aura from interacting with other auras. However, despite the Nightwalker's cape's isolation effect, the temple's divine might still reduced Shifeng's mobility by 30%. Even a true Tier 6 god's divine might couldn't compete with this ancient temple's divine might. Apart from ancient gods, there should be no other existence capable of creating such a powerful construct. When Shifeng arrived in front of the temple, the several hundred evil blood monsters that had been frenziedly chasing him suddenly stopped. They simply stood at a distance and worshipped the temple, none of them showing any intention of approaching it. Shifeng sighed in relief at this sight. Now, all he needed to do was figure out how to enter the ancient temple. However, when Shifeng entered the temple, what greeted him inside the brightly illuminated hall was the sight of a cloaked, scholarly young man. The youth was piecing together several golden tablets using magic arrays so complex that they gave Shifeng a headache. The instant Shifeng laid eyes on this youth, his soul shuddered. "It's you." Shifeng's eyes filled with disbelief as he looked at the scholarly youth. This was because this youth was none other than the mysterious youth who had caused a huge commotion in Blackwing City and bound his soul using soul chains during the early stages of the game. "Oh, it's you." The mysterious youth was slightly surprised when he saw Shifeng behind him. "You actually survived until now, even after getting hit by my soul chains? What a surprise. Should I be honored that you remember me?" Shifeng eyed the mysterious youth cautiously. Back when he encountered the mysterious youth in Blackwing City, he had already thought the NPC was extraordinary, definitely not your average Tier 5 NPC. Otherwise, this mysterious youth couldn't have escaped Blackwing City after causing such a huge scene. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. In fact, Shifeng still couldn't glean much information from the mysterious youth despite being Tier 5 himself. The only thing he found out from inspecting the mysterious youth was that the latter was also at Tier 5. Moreover, the mysterious youth gave off a weird vibe. Shifeng felt an inexplicable fear when standing in the youth's presence. "Not bad. Not only are you blessed by this world, but you also managed to get promoted to Tier 5 so quickly. You just barely qualify to become my puppet," the mysterious youth said, a delighted smile appearing on his face as he looked at Shifeng, like a child who had just found a new toy. "Since you took the initiative to come find me, let me liberate you from your suffering." After saying so, The mysterious youth raised his arm and pointed a finger at Shifeng. A black ball of mana shot toward Shifeng. In mid-flight, the ball of mana shattered and enveloped the surrounding space in darkness. Tier 5 Curse, Dark Wonderland. Chapter 2897, Terrifying Scholar. Chapter 2897, Terrifying Scholar. Shifeng tensed when he saw the mysterious youth's Tier 5 curse activate. He immediately unsheathed the Light of Two Worlds and counterattacked. World Breaker. Suddenly, a blinding beam struck at the endless darkness. The two powers entangled for a moment, neither side gaining an advantage over the other until a second later. Boom. Accompanied by an explosion, an intense shockwave sent Shifeng stumbling 2 steps back. His HP also instantly fell by over 9 million. Besides reducing Shifeng's HP by more than 20%, the shockwave also left his entire body trembling. The hand he used to wield the Light of Two Worlds was numb. In contrast, the mysterious youth came out unscathed from the clash. He still stood quietly in his original position. He also maintained the incomparably complex fourfold magic array he was using to manipulate the several golden tablets with his other hand throughout the attack. As expected of an existence daring enough to cause a scene in Blackwing City, he not only cast a Tier 5 curse without chanting but even maintained such a complex magic array while doing so. Shifeng frowned when he looked at his trembling right arm. This was undoubtedly the most dangerous situation he had ever come across since entering God's domain. Shifeng had long since known that the mysterious youth was incredibly powerful and that the youth could cast Tier 5 curses without chanting. However, only after facing the youth's Tier 5 curse did he understand just how frightening the mysterious youth was. If Shifeng hadn't upgraded the Light of Two Worlds, the Tier 5 curse would have killed him just now. Meanwhile, the powerful shockwave from their clash also shattered the space some distance behind the youth, revealing a woman with 8 black wings. Numerous chains bound this woman's body, and her HP was below 10%. However, despite being practically at death's door, she radiated an aura that sent shivers down Shifeng's spine. How is this possible? Shifeng was dumbfounded when he saw the 8-winged woman. A fallen angel. Moreover, a fallen archangel. A fallen angel of the highest order. Fallen angels possessed life ratings close to those of dragons. Meanwhile, fallen archangels' life ratings surpassed even that of ordinary dragons. They almost rivaled divine dragons. Yet, the mysterious youth had incapacitated a level 180, Tier 5 fallen archangel with one hand. The fallen archangel was even losing HP and gradually approaching death's door. While Shifeng was in a daze, the mysterious youth also looked with surprise at the Light of Two Worlds Shifeng wielded. It seems you are incredibly lucky. You actually got your hands on a weapon lost during the ancient era. Looking at the Light of Two Worlds, the youth evaluated calmly. It's a pity that this Light of Two Worlds is damaged. Otherwise, you might have been able to injure me with its power. Although the mysterious youth's words sounded arrogant, Shifeng did not think so at all. On the contrary, his mood grew even heavier after hearing the mysterious youth's statement. The mysterious youth could strangle even a Tier 5 fallen archangel to death. Even if the Light of Two Worlds were at its peak, Shifeng doubted he could injure the mysterious youth. After all, a weapon's performance depended heavily on its user. Shifeng had only recently reached Tier 5. He didn't even know how to go about getting promoted to Tier 6. Even if he wielded the undamaged Light of Two Worlds, he could, at most, exchange one move against a Tier 6 God-ranked player who didn't possess any legendary weapons and equipment. Moreover, just like the mysterious youth had said, Shifeng was indeed very lucky. If the mysterious youth weren't focusing a significant portion of his strength on dealing with the fallen archangel guarding the temple's entrance, Shifeng would have long since died already. However, our little game ends here. I'm busy. I don't have much time to waste on you, so can you please die? The mysterious youth waved his hand in annoyance once more. This time, though, he also chanted an incantation. Shifeng sensed the mana around the temple vanishing. Moreover, it wasn't limited to just the mana in this plane of existence. Even the mana in the void was disappearing, making Shifeng feel stifled. In the meantime, silver magic arrays appeared, one after another, before the mysterious youth's hand, layering to create a fourfold magic array. The Tier 5 Curse Spacetime Disintegrator? Shifeng's complexion darkened like never before when he saw the gradually forming fourfold magic array. There were significant differences even among Tier 5 curses. Dark Wonderland was a Tier 5 intermediate curse, but the Spacetime Disintegrator was a Tier 5 peak curse. This attack could heavily injure even a Tier 6 god if it landed. Die. The mysterious youth gently pushed the fourfold magic array with his free hand. Suddenly, the space in front of Shifeng began distorting and disintegrating. With the Tier 5 curse's speed and AoE, Shifeng had no way to dodge or escape it in time. Moreover, even a Tier 5 defensive curse wouldn't have the power to stop this attack. Don't even think of killing me so easily. Looking at the oncoming attack, Shifeng gritted his teeth and took out the greatest trump card in his bag, the dragon summoning flute. He then injected the 3,000 advanced magic cores he had prepared into the flute. Immediately, space around Shifeng began distorting as well. 5 gigantic figures flew out of the warp and instantly occupied a significant portion of the space around the ancient temple. Boom! Accompanied by the sound of an explosion, the sight of 5 level 180, Tier 5 dragons entered Shifeng's eyes. The brief invulnerability Shifeng received from using the dragon summoning flute had helped him resist the spacetime disintegration, allowing him to survive the ordeal. However, Shifeng's situation did not change for the better even after the 5 dragons appeared. When the mysterious youth looked at the 5 Tier 5 dragons, his expression remained completely unfazed, as if only 5 harmless lizards had appeared in front of him. He placed no importance whatsoever on their existence. The scholar. This summoner has found a troublesome opponent for us. Be if I knew this would happen, I would never have agreed to the dragon summoning flute's contract. This is a massive loss. The 5 dragons with bodies measuring several hundred meters in length revealed traces of frustration and helplessness in their eyes when they saw the mysterious youth. Their voices also carried hints of dissatisfaction directed at Shifeng. Meanwhile, after briefly scanning the 5 dragons, the mysterious youth asked calmly, "Are you 5 going to become my enemies? Scholar, how about we talk this out? If you help us fulfill our contract by letting this heaven-blessed individual go, then we won't have to clash," the leading bronze dragon said. The bronze dragon's suggestion completely ignored Shifeng's will. However, Shifeng didn't have any opinions on it, either. He simply observed the mysterious youth and awaited the latter's decision. Is he one of the 3 existences Phoenix Rain warned me to avoid? As Shifeng scrutinized the mysterious youth, he faintly understood why Phoenix Rain had given him such a warning. The mysterious youth's strength was simply unbelievable. Shifeng couldn't even inspect his level. Moreover, even Tier 6 gods would have a headache when facing 5 Tier 5 dragons. Nevertheless, the mysterious youth showed no reaction whatsoever. When the bronze dragon made its suggestion, the mysterious youth remained unchanged. In a calm tone, he asked, "Do you think that's possible? You are merely a bunch of ghosts from the past, yet you dare speak conditions with me?" After saying so, the mysterious youth took action. A golden staff appeared in his hands, and Shifeng's pupils shrank at the sight of this weapon. This was because Shifeng was incredibly familiar with the golden staff. The World Staff. One of God's domain's 10 great legendary weapons. It seems a battle is inevitable, the bronze dragon sighed helplessly. It then looked at Shifeng and said, "Once the fight begins, find an opportunity to escape. The 5 of us can't stop him for long. Outside this secret land, he cannot act without restraint. So long as you get out, he'll have a much more difficult time dealing with you." After the bronze dragon finished speaking, the 4 other dragons unleashed their auras. All 5 dragons were prepared to duke it out with the mysterious youth. Act without restraint. The bronze dragon's words clued Shifeng in on the mysterious youth's weakness. The mysterious youth most likely couldn't act freely in the outside world due to certain restrictions. This would also explain why he had fled Blackwing City previously instead of clashing with Charlin. Logically, with the mysterious youth's strength, he shouldn't fear Charlin. After all, the mysterious youth remained fearless and still insisted on killing Shifeng despite facing off against 5 Tier 5 dragons. Yet, He had fled Blackwing City back then. However, before Shifeng could properly process the information, the 5 dragons began clashing with the mysterious youth. The dragons did not hold anything back, utilizing their breath attacks right off the bat. Meanwhile, the mysterious youth waved his staff. A barrier appeared before him, stopping the breath attacks completely. As a result, the two sides entered a stalemate. You damnable things! If I wasn't occupied with something important here, do you think you 5 little bastards can stand up against me? The mysterious youth grew dissatisfied when he saw the stalemate. Ignoring the mysterious youth's words, the leading bronze dragon shouted at Shifeng, "Run now." Although the 5 dragons had pinned down the mysterious youth with their breath attacks, the mysterious youth's barrier was also steadily advancing toward the dragons. He held a clear advantage over the dragons. Do I leave? Shifeng hesitated as he looked at the mysterious youth and the golden tablets beside him. He had a hunch that if he let the mysterious youth achieve his goal, something very troublesome would happen in the near future. He might even get swept up in this big problem. Despite facing the all-out attacks of 5 Tier 5 dragons, the mysterious youth still split a significant portion of his attention into manipulating the golden tablets to unravel the divine runes wrapped around the fallen archangel. Shifeng was certain that the fallen archangel had a big secret hidden on her body. Screw it. Gritting his teeth, Shifeng chose to spend his legacy skill points to learn the Tier 5 legacy skill Returning Blade, the sole Tier 5 Berserk skill available to him. Even after players reached Tier 5 in God's domain, the legacy skill points they earned through leveling up wouldn't be enough to learn even one Tier 5 legacy skill. Typically, they would still need to accumulate more points through quests. Fortunately, Shifeng had acquired a lot of legacy skill points from handing Beast Emperor over to the War God's Temple. Those, combined with his leftover points, were just enough to learn one Tier 5 legacy skill. Shifeng had previously chosen not to learn a Tier 5 legacy skill first to have more options in future predicaments. However, he no longer had the luxury of waiting. Immediately after learning Returning Blade, Shifeng activated the Berserk skill, causing the light of 2 worlds he wielded to vibrate and let out a low hum. Simultaneously, incomparable power flowed into Shifeng's body, elevating his basic attributes and life rating to a whole other level. The next moment, Shifeng's strength attribute broke through the 200,000 threshold. His HP also exceeded 100 million. Now, even if he didn't rival Tier 6 God-ranked experts, he was very close already. 30 seconds. I need to foil his plans in 30 seconds. If I fail to do so, I must leave immediately. After taking a look at Returning Blade's description, Shifeng found that the skill had a 45-second duration and a cooldown of 1 natural day. He estimated that escaping the evil god's secret land within 15 seconds shouldn't be difficult with his current basic attributes. After thinking up to this point, Shifeng charged straight toward the restricted fallen archangel. Shifeng didn't have the slightest thought of dealing with the mysterious youth. If even 5 level 180, Tier 5 dragons were helpless against the mysterious youth, then his chances were even less. The only thing he could do in this situation was kill the fallen archangel and foil the mysterious youth's plans. After all, he had long since formed an irreconcilable grudge with the mysterious youth. If he didn't kill the mysterious youth, or the mysterious youth did not take the initiative to dissolve the soul chains binding his soul, he would still perish sooner or later, despite being a Tier 5 player. In that case, he might as well use this opportunity to weaken the mysterious youth. For all he knew, he might even get to live longer. You bastard! The mysterious youth's complexion sank when he saw what Shifeng was trying to do. Immediately, he began chanting an incantation. Tier 5 Curse, Dark Space. Numerous pitch-black chains emerged from the space above the temple and shot toward Shifeng, preventing him from approaching the fallen archangel. Upon seeing the several hundred chains raining down toward him, Shifeng immediately activated Divine Steps. Suddenly, 36 doppelgangers emerged from Shifeng's body and dashed toward the fallen archangel from different directions. As these doppelgangers were invulnerable to attacks and Shifeng could swap positions with any of them at any time, the mysterious youth had a headache dealing with Shifeng. Catching Shifeng alone using several hundred chains might be easy, but catching 37 individuals of Shifeng's caliber was not. In less than 2 seconds, one of Shifeng's doppelgangers reached the fallen archangel and executed an attack. However, before the doppelganger's attack could connect, several dozen chains immediately bound its body. Afterward, 6 more doppelgangers arrived before the fallen archangel, and the several dozen chains in the vicinity were insufficient to stop all of them. In the end, one of the doppelgangers successfully evaded the chains and executed a ruthless attack on the fallen archangel. The moment the doppelganger's sword was about to connect, Shifeng, who had been preparing for an attack in the distance, swapped positions with this doppelganger. Second sword, Holy Devour. Now that Shifeng had a life rating and basic attributes close to rivaling Tier 6 God-ranked players, he could perfectly execute Holy Devour. The next moment, scorching flames capable of devouring even space itself enveloped the defenseless fallen archangel. -5,416,541,412. A damage value exceeding 5.4 billion appeared above the fallen archangel's head as she lost more than 2% of her HP. This development ignited some hope in Shifeng. "You little bastard. You've angered me now." A cold gleam flashed in the mysterious youth's eyes as he shook his staff. The barrier he summoned shoved back the 5 dragons' dragon breath completely, and the golden staff he wielded released a blinding radiance. Then, the space around the fallen archangel shattered. Countless beams of light shot out of the shattered space and pierced every one of Shifeng's doppelgangers, leaving an irrecoverable wound on them. If Shifeng hadn't swapped positions with his distant doppelganger immediately, he would have most likely lost his life to this attack. However, Shifeng did not stop despite this situation. Without hesitation, he used the light of 2 worlds' spatial slash. Shifeng swung his blade, his attack instantly cutting through the fallen archangel. The attack was so fast that the mysterious youth, whom the 5 dragons pinned down, failed to stop it. Meanwhile, this attack had reaped nearly 3% of the fallen archangel's HP. "That's enough from you." The mysterious youth began chanting another incantation for a defensive curse when he saw the fallen archangel's dwindling HP die. Knowing that once the mysterious youth completed his incantation, all hope of success would be lost, Shifeng immediately executed the strongest move his mana technique had to offer. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Third Sword, Holy Annihilation. Holy Annihilation was an unostentatious technique. There was no giant blade of light or a scorching sea of flames. All that could be seen was Shifeng executing a simple downward slash. However, when this modest slash connected, it plundered all of the fallen archangel's remaining HP. Following the fallen archangel's death, Shifeng's level skyrocketed, and several hundred items appeared around her corpse. The mysterious youth's eyes turned bloodshot, and he went into a frenzy. Shifeng immediately grabbed a few of the strongest items he saw, swapped positions with his doppelganger again, entered the void, and dashed for the temple's exit. Chapter 2898, Mana Advances. Chapter 2898, Mana Advances. The instant Shifeng made for the temple's exit, the mysterious youth took action. Now that the mysterious youth no longer had most of his strength and attention tied up with the fallen archangel, he had recovered to his peak condition. With a wave of his staff, he summoned 3 fourfold magic arrays around him. Tier 5 Curse, World Severance. Tier 5 Curse, Spacetime Seal. Tier 5 Curse, Holy Spirit Collapse. Triple Silent Casting. Shifeng was thunderstruck when he saw the 3 magic arrays. In God's domain, the difficulty of silent casting a spell increased along with the tier of the spell. Even Tier 5 Divine Mags would have difficulty silent casting one Tier 5 spell, while double silent casting Tier 5 spells was something only the best among Tier 5 magical classes could accomplish. Moreover, this applied only to Tier 5 spells, not Tier 5 curses. Only Tier 6 gods could double silent cast Tier 5 curses. As for triple silent casting Tier 5 curses, Shifeng had no recollection of anyone ever accomplishing this feat in his previous life. Nevertheless, the mysterious youth had accomplished this feat before Shifeng could reach the exit. He suddenly found himself immobilized inside the void. In the end, not only was he forced to exit the void, but his mobility was also severely restricted by the surrounding space. A distorted barrier enveloped the entire temple hall. 6 pillars of light then appeared around Shifeng, forming an intricate magic array that caged him. Afterward, the ground lit up with a divine glow, causing the mana within the affected space to disintegrate rapidly. Just as the mysterious youth was about to obliterate Shifeng, the 5 dragons simultaneously chanted an incantation in the language of dragons. A 5-colored disk of light formed around Shifeng, isolating him from the outside world. Boom! When the divine light dissipated, Shifeng remained perfectly intact. However, the brightness of the disk of light protecting him had dimmed significantly as a result. Evidently, it could withstand only a limited number of attacks from the mysterious youth's Holy Spirit collapse. It wasn't an invincible defensive spell. The mysterious youth glared at the 5 dragons hatefully and said coldly, "A futile struggle. All of you will die here today." After saying so, the mysterious youth waved his staff, and the space within the temple darkened. Countless dark purple chains emerged from the void and instantly bound 3 of the 5 dragons, thoroughly immobilizing them. Only the leading bronze dragon and a fire dragon had managed to evade the chain's initial assault by relying on their skills. Shifeng had also managed to evade the chains, thanks to his 36 doppelgangers. However, now that chains surrounded the entire hall, he was in a tight spot. With World Severance and Spacetime Seal acting on the hall, even a Tier 6 God-ranked player would have trouble breaking out, let alone a Tier 5 player like Shifeng. It's all or nothing. Looking at the nearby distorted barrier, Shifeng gritted his teeth and used the light of 2 Worlds' second skill, Golden Soul. After he had reached Tier 5, the skill had also undergone a qualitative transformation. Instead of providing a boost to his perception and control of mana, it now upgraded the quality of his soul. Activating the skill would grant him a soul bordering that of Tier 6 gods. However, activating this skill came with risks. When activated at Tier 5, Golden Soul would leave his soul in a weakened state for a short period once the skill's duration ended. A side effect like this would significantly impact a player's performance. This made Golden Soul a skill reserved for last-ditch stands. After Shifeng activated Golden Soul, his perception of the world around him changed completely. As if he was a 3-dimensional being looking at a 2-dimensional world, he could see everything around him with incredible clarity. The ambient mana also became an extension of his body, and he could freely manipulate it at will. It was much better than when he manipulated it using his mana domain. He had finally reached the level of actually manipulating mana. Immediately, Shifeng brandished the light of 2 worlds at the distorted barrier before him. Third sword, Holy Annihilation. Compared to the Holy Annihilation Shifeng executed before, the one he executed now had undergone a heaven-defying transformation. Now, even the space around him had become one with his sword. He felt as if he was swinging space itself at the distorted barrier. Boom! The distorted barrier shook violently from Shifeng's Holy Annihilation. A small crack also appeared on the barrier, although the barrier quickly repaired this damage. Now, this is the true Holy Annihilation. I was mistaken when I tried to guide ambient mana using my own mana. Instead, I should have converted the ambient mana into my own mana. Only by doing so can I maximize my attack's power. Shifeng didn't despair when he saw the distorted barrier repairing itself. On the contrary, excitement burned within him. He finally understood how to progress to the next step of mana manipulation. Initially, he had used his own mana to force ambient mana into doing his bidding, an incredibly crude method of manipulating mana. Afterward, he had learned to guide ambient mana into doing his bidding. While this method had indeed significantly increased the power he could exert, it still wasn't the best method of utilizing ambient mana. Instead, the optimal way of utilizing mana was to convert ambient mana into his own mana. However, accomplishing this feat was easier said than done. Firstly, players needed to have an in-depth understanding of mana's operating principles. Secondly, players' concentration needed to be close to the Tier 6 standard. Only by having a near-solid mental will could players perfectly integrate their mana with the ambient mana. Players needed to have such a powerful concentration that they could project their will beyond their physical bodies and exert it over the mana surrounding them. Thirdly, players needed the ability to multitask to the extreme. The more mana players tried to influence, the more multitasking they had to do. If players wished to improve their ability to integrate and manipulate ambient mana, they had to keep refining their understanding of mana to reduce the mental burden from controlling mana. Meanwhile, after finding a clear path of advancement, Shifeng began frenziedly executing Holy Annihilation against the distorted barrier. Every time he executed Holy Annihilation, his control over mana also became increasingly smoother. Simultaneously, admiration for the heavenly blue Saint Eliade filled his heart. Holy Annihilation's use of mana far exceeded the basic standard. The basic use of mana only allowed one to create inanimate objects like the mana bridge. However, Eliade's usage allowed her to create living objects. Her technique, Holy Annihilation, basically modified ambient mana into a true extension of the body. If Shifeng hadn't reached the Grandmaster Magician standard, he would have never understood this concept. After he gained this understanding, every subsequent Holy Annihilation he executed was more powerful than the previous one. By the time he had executed 24 attacks, the colorful disk of light was close to dissipating. Fortunately, he had finally achieved a breakthrough. The next time Shifeng executed Holy Annihilation, a white light enveloped the world around him. Mana, space, and even the void disappeared. The next moment, a 30-meter-long gash appeared in the previously invincible barrier. The barrier failed to repair the damage and collapsed. So, this is what it feels like to employ the advanced method of using mana? Shifeng was startled when he saw the barrier generated by World Severance crumble. The attack he just executed had undoubtedly reached the Tier 6 standard far stronger than even an attack using the Light of Two Worlds' World Breaker. However, after executing this attack, Shifeng felt his mind stagnate slightly. In his current state, he definitely couldn't execute the complete Holy Annihilation. Unless he upgraded his concentration to the Tier 6 standard, he could only keep this move as a trump card. As the distorted barrier shattered, the mysterious youth finally restricted all 5 dragons. He then sent his remaining chains after Shifeng. Upon seeing this, Shifeng promptly activated Void Shield, his last trump card, increasing his movement speed by 300%. Even under the suppression of the mysterious youth's spacetime seal, he still managed to escape from the temple instantly and flee the primordial ruin. However, the mysterious youth did not give up. Several hundred dark purple chains relentlessly tried to hinder Shifeng's escape. Every collision with a chain inflicted over 10 million damage. If not for Void Shield's protection, he would have died after receiving a few hits. After exiting the primordial ruin, Shifeng contacted Zero Wings members, who were close to dying to the evil blood monsters, and commanded them to leave the evil god's secret land immediately. If they got caught by the mysterious youth's chains, they couldn't die even if they wanted to. Although everyone was confused by Shifeng's command, they still obeyed it without hesitation and were out of the evil god's secret land in no time. As for Shifeng, because the mysterious youth's spacetime seal stopped affecting him after he left the primordial ruin, none of the dark purple chains could do anything to him. In less than 10 seconds, he exited the secret land. 2 seconds later, the mysterious youth appeared by the secret land's exit, with an indescribably cold light in his eyes. When the mysterious youth failed to kill Shifeng, the restrained, leading bronze dragon laughed and said, "Scholar, how pitiful of you. Not only did your many years of planning come to naught, but you even let the cause of your failure escape. So what if he escaped? Do you think I can't do anything to him outside?" The mysterious youth did not get angered by the bronze dragon's words. Sending a calm glance at the bronze dragon, he said, "I will settle his debt with me eventually. So long as he is inside this cage, he will not escape my hands. I will also escape this cage sooner or later." After saying so, the mysterious youth waved his staff and turned the 5 dragons into ash. On the other side, Shifeng finally arrived back in the City Lord's mansion's control room. After staring at the evil god's secret land's entrance for some time, he breathed out a sigh of relief, thinking to himself, "Seeing as there's no reaction after all this time, I should be fine now." Shifeng did not wish to meet the mysterious youth a third time. The mysterious youth's combat power exceeded common sense. If not for the 5 dragons' assistance, Shifeng would have perished just now. "Guild leader, what did you do inside the ruin?" How are you level 172 already? Fire Dance asked in confusion after seeing Shifeng exit the secret land. Shifeng had only been level 167 when he entered the primordial ruin, yet he was now level 172. He had gained 5 whole levels in a matter of minutes. His leveling speed was out of this world. When Shifeng took a look at his own level, he, too, was slightly surprised. He never thought that killing a level 180, Tier 5 Fallen Archangel would grant so much EXP. Not to mention, he hadn't killed the Fallen Archangel by himself. What he had done was basically killsteal, so he hadn't received all of the EXP the Fallen Archangel granted. Yet, he still leveled up 5 times. Through this, he could tell just how powerful the Fallen Archangel was. If he had come across her under normal circumstances, he would have died without a doubt. You killed a level 180, Tier 5 Fallen Archangel? Guild leader, you're not lying to us, right? That's a Fallen Archangel we're talking about. Everyone was momentarily stunned when they heard Shifeng's explanation. They couldn't help doubting his words. Fallen Archangels were existences rivaling divine dragons. A Tier 5 Fallen Archangel was an existence standing at the apex of the current god's domain. A Tier 5 player would be fortunate to escape a Tier 5 Fallen Archangel, let alone kill one. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU of course not. Shifeng chuckled when he saw the skeptical looks they all gave him. What good would lying to you do? Moreover, I also grabbed some items that Fallen Archangel dropped. After saying so, Shifeng took out the 4 items he looted from the Fallen Archangel. As soon as he did so, the mana in the control room froze, and everyone gasped inadvertently. They all felt their hearts palpitating in fear in the presence of the 4 items, and they stumbled back despite themselves. Meanwhile, after Shifeng took a look at one of the items he took out of his bag, he, too, was stunned. Astonishment filled his eyes as he stared at the rainbow-colored crystal ball before him. An ancient god's eye? Chapter 2899, Ancient God's Legacy. Chapter 2899, Ancient God's Legacy. When Shifeng brought out the Ancient God's Eye, he wasn't the only one surprised by the item's identity. Cold Shadow, who stood nearby, also widened her eyes in shock. She couldn't help looking at Shifeng, who had acquired this item, as if he was some kind of alien. An ancient god. Ancient gods were the oldest gods in God's domain. They were existences that had come into being along with God's domain. The many gods of later generations only managed to gain their strength because of the legacies from these ancient gods. However, after God's domain transitioned from the primordial era to the ancient era, ancient gods had suddenly disappeared from the world. In the modern era, barely any records mentioned ancient gods. However, according to those found in the modern era's libraries, a large part of the reason humans managed to rise up during ancient times was the ancient gods' legacies, which allowed the human race to give birth to many gods. Although the rainbow crystal ball Shifeng held was named an ancient god's eye, it wasn't actually an eyeball. Instead, it was an ancient god's legacy. It was a legacy that could help players reach Tier 6. It was much stronger than the legacies of ordinary gods. No wonder that mysterious youth wanted to deal with the Fallen Archangel. Let alone a Tier 5 existence, even Tier 6 gods would covet an ancient god's eye. Realization dawned upon Shifeng as he looked at the crystal ball he held. Ancient god's eye, divine artifact rank, consumable. This is a legacy item left behind by an ancient god. It records the ancient god's many legacies. Each activation of the ancient god's eye requires 1007 luminaries crystals. It can be activated up to 9 times. Once the activation limit is reached, all information recorded within the ancient god's eye will disappear. Current usage count, 0. Out of all the legacies available in God's domain, an ancient god's legacy belonged to the strongest category. If a player managed to grasp even a portion of the legacy, becoming a Tier 6 god wouldn't be difficult. If a player managed to grasp a significant portion, becoming a god was practically inevitable. It was no exaggeration to say that this single ancient god's eye was worth more than 10 legendary weapons and the loss of the dragon summoning flute. However, Shifeng quickly suppressed his excitement and turned his attention to the 3 other items he looted. Although these 3 items were not as powerful as the ancient god's eye, they still radiated incredibly potent divine might. Even Fire Dance felt pressured by them, what more the other Tier 4 players present. That mysterious youth definitely won't let me off the hook after this. Shifeng chuckled when he saw the 3 other items' identities. All 3 items were extraordinary. 2 were inferior divine artifact ranked materials, and 1 was an inferior divine artifact ranked consumable. One of the 2 materials was even a divine power source. As for the consumable, it was the ancient god's blood, an item that could elevate a non-player creature's growth potential and life rating. It was undoubtedly the most powerful enhancement item Shifeng had ever seen in God's domain. The total value of the 4 items Shifeng got from killing the fallen archangel was something he couldn't get even if he killed 3 or 4 Tier 6 gods. Shifeng was also certain that these were all items that mysterious youth wanted. Now that he had acquired them instead, the mysterious youth would definitely take action against him at all costs. After a brief silence fell in the hall, Fire Dance reported to Shifeng, guild leader, according to Liang Jing, the Outer Worlds NPC army has arrived on the eastern continent. Currently, it has split into 6 groups of over 30,000 Tier 4 NPCs and 4 million Tier 3 NPCs each. All of these NPCs are above level 150. As we expected, one of these groups is marching toward the Twin Towers Kingdom and Star Moon Kingdom. At their current speed, it'll only take them another 3 or 4 days to reach the Twin Towers Kingdom's vicinity. In the case of the Outer World superpowers, their forces have already gathered outside the Twin Towers Kingdom. They have even dispatched many scouting teams to invade the kingdom, and the kingdom's forces have already clashed with these scouting teams. Although the 2 sides are at a stalemate now, it is only a matter of time before the kingdom's side loses. According to Melancholic's investigations, Starlink and many other superpowers are offering excellent incentives to independent experts to have them head to the Dark Knight Empire and the Black Dragon Empire. They plan to resist the Outer World forces together with the 2 empires. Because of this, many independent experts have decided to abandon Twin Towers and Star Moon. When Fire Dance finished speaking, Cold Shadow frowned and said, "How foolish these people are. Sticking with an empire's defensive line might be a good choice, but abandoning all resistance in the various kingdoms will inflict a severe loss to the various kingdoms' armies. All they're doing is giving the Outer World forces an advantage. Unlike for players, resurrection was a very troublesome process for NPCs. The Outer World's NPC army wasn't endless, either. Hence, if players worked together to defend the various kingdoms, repelling the Outer World forces was entirely possible. In the worst-case scenario, they could, at least, weaken the Outer World forces. Abandoning the various kingdoms outright and choosing to fight a decisive battle at the defensive lines of empires was an absolutely foolish decision. However, Shifeng wasn't too surprised by this situation. Calmly, he said, "This is normal. Although players can recover the levels they lose with a little effort, finding replacements for the weapons and equipment they lose is very difficult. Given a choice, they will naturally prefer a more stable battle. Not to mention, with Starlink and the other superpowers' interference, it's only natural for independent players to abandon resisting in kingdoms and choose to fight in empires instead. In his previous life, the most astonishing aspect of a war between countries wasn't the number of player deaths. Instead, it was the weapons and equipment lost. Many kingdoms and empires had suffered annihilation because the player forces in those countries had depleted their stockpile of weapons and equipment. As a result, the players of those countries became weaker and weaker as they fought. In the end, they could only watch their enemies annex their nations bit by bit until the country disappeared completely. The current War of Worlds was a similar situation. After realizing this fact, all Starlink and the various superpowers needed to do was put out appropriate bait, and the various independent players would automatically swarm to the bait. Guild leader, how about I bring the main force to the Twin Towers Kingdom and participate in the battle there? Kola suggested. I refuse to believe that we can't kill a bunch of scouting teams. So long as we secure a few victories, I believe many players will be willing to stay and fight with us. Although Kola didn't understand much about battles on the scale of countries, he knew that without the support of a large number of independent players, the Twin Towers Kingdom and Star Moon Kingdom would fall to the outerworld forces. The reason many independent experts were abandoning the two kingdoms was simply their belief that defending against the outerworld forces in an empire would be easier. Meanwhile, all Zero Wing needed to do was suppress and repel the outerworld players plaguing the Twin Towers Kingdom. Then, the independent players who had left would see hope for successfully defending the kingdom. Once that happened, they would definitely return to help in the kingdom's defense. After all, abandoning one's roots and restarting development in a foreign country wasn't easy. That won't be necessary. Shifeng shook his head. Smiling calmly, he said, dealing with those scouting teams will only be a waste of time. If we're going to do something, we should go for something bigger. Bigger? Kola parroted in confusion. Fire, bring a team and look into the Twin Towers Kingdom's current situation. Make sure to find the base camp of the outerworld players invading the Twin Towers Kingdom. Once you do, notify me immediately, Shifeng instructed. When Cold Shadow heard Shifeng's words, she turned to Shifeng with a stunned look. Guild leader, are you thinking of wiping them out? Nodding, Shifeng said earnestly, of course. If Starlink and the other superpowers want to waste their time, let them. However, Zero Wing doesn't have that much time to waste. The real role of high-end combatants wasn't in defending strongholds but attacking the enemy's core combatants. In his previous life, any player force that dared to gather their troops into one big army was simply asking for death. However, be it the Eastern Continent's players or the Outer Worlds players, neither had a clear understanding of truly large-scale battles in God's domain yet. They were still acting as if they were playing traditional virtual reality games, entirely ignorant of just how much power a single individual could wield. I'll head out right away. Fire Dance grew excited at Shifeng's affirmation. After saying so, Fire Dance activated a guild transfer scroll and teleported to the guild residence at Sky Spring City. As for everyone else present, Shifeng had them take a break and dismissed them. After all, their continuous battles in the evil god's secret land had taken a huge toll on their minds and bodies. After settling his affairs here, Shifeng made his way to the City Lord's mansion's secret room to rest and recuperate. Shifeng had exhausted his concentration during his fight with the mysterious youth. Now, even his soul was in a weakened state. To recover quickly, he had to rest in the City Lord's mansion's underground secret room, which held the densest mana in ancient Rock City. This environment should be enough. Now, all I need to do is recover my concentration. After setting up a simple mana-gathering magic array, Shifeng took out a crystal of souls from his bag and ate it. Immediately, a wave of comfort spread across his soul. Once his soul had fully recovered, Shifeng fished the ancient god's eye from his bag. He then took out 1007 luminaries crystals from his dwindling stockpile and injected them into the ancient god's eye. During his fight with the mysterious youth, Shifeng had come to understand just how feeble he was. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Now that Shifeng had the threat of the mysterious youth and the outer world forces looming over him, it was best if he increased his strength as quickly as possible. Hence, he did not intend to strengthen himself before receiving the legacy guidance in the ancient god's eye. Instead, he would inherit it now to maximize his current strengths. After Shifeng injected the 1007 luminaries crystals, the ancient god's eye suddenly released purple fumes, which gradually seeped into his body and merged with his soul. The moment his soul came into contact with the purple fumes, Shifeng suffered a splitting headache, and an unprecedented heat spread throughout his body. He felt as if someone was trying to cram an endless amount of knowledge into his brain, and his brain was working overtime and heating up as it tried to process all this information. This sensation lasted for several minutes before it gradually dissipated. When all of the purple fumes from the ancient god's eye had merged with Shifeng's soul, the legacy guidance finally ended. Chapter 2900, Legendary Weapon. Chapter 2900, Legendary Weapon. Even after the purple fumes in the secret room disappeared, Shifeng remained seated, unmoving like a statue. Only after more than a dozen minutes had gone by did he slowly open his eyes and take a deep breath. How close! Shifeng celebrated inwardly as he looked at the ancient god's eye. Had my concentration not reached the Tier 5 intermediate standard already, I would have most likely failed to absorb 100% of the legacy guidance. The ancient gods I conveyed a massive amount of information. If his soul hadn't recovered to peak condition, he wouldn't have been able to accept all of the information. Meanwhile, if he missed out on even a small portion of the legacy, he would have failed and obtained nothing at all. But this is a surprise. I never thought that the key factor in getting promoted to Tier 6 would be 7 luminaries crystals. Shifeng sighed as he recalled the information he received. 7 luminaries crystals had always been a rare resource in God's domain, and this was true even in the ancient era. Although Shifeng had long since known that all organizations with Tier 6 God-ranked experts would frenziedly collect 7 luminaries crystals, he had thought that they had done so mainly to exchange for the Green God Company's products and construct their personal virtual space in God's domain. He never imagined 7 luminaries crystals had such a use as well. Now, Shifeng slightly regretted selling his 7 luminaries crystals. According to the ancient god's legacy, apart from having Tier 6 concentration and an excellent grasp of the world's laws, players seeking to get promoted to Tier 6 also needed an enormous amount of 7 luminaries crystals to construct a divine body. Each attempt at creating a divine body required at least 50,000 7 luminaries crystals. Moreover, this was only for the most common divine body. According to the ancient god's legacy, divine bodies had 2 categories: ordinary divine bodies and superior divine bodies. Ordinary divine bodies were the most common in God's domain. Over 99% of gods and God-ranked players had an ordinary divine body. Superior divine bodies, on the other hand, were much rarer. The divine bodies of the 3 goddesses rumored to have saved God's domain, as well as those of the war god, the godslayer, and many ancient gods, were at this level. Superior divine bodies were that rare because their creation required an individual to have ultimate mastery over a certain world law. This was also why individuals titled saints possessed the strength to contend against gods. Saints were mortals who had achieved ultimate mastery over a certain world law but did not become gods. In addition to this requirement, constructing a superior divine body cost 100,000 7 luminaries crystals. And worse, players would lose all of the invested crystals if they failed even once. In contrast, the construction of an ordinary divine body occurred in stages. Even if players failed, they would lose only the crystals they invested in that particular stage. This gradual method also allowed them to know where they went wrong. However, that wasn't the case for the construction of a superior divine body, which was an all-or-nothing attempt. Players were required to spend all 100,000 7 luminaries crystals in one fell swoop to construct their divine bodies. If they succeeded, then good. If not, then all of the 7 luminaries crystals they invested would disappear. Currently, though, Shifeng couldn't afford even the construction of an ordinary divine body. For current player forces, 7 luminaries crystals are merely a commodity for the construction of personal virtual spaces or the acquisition of resources from the Green God Company. It shouldn't be difficult to obtain a large amount right now. Shifeng fell into deep thought as he recalled the information from the ancient god's legacy. Constructing an ordinary divine body shouldn't be a tough challenge, but a superior divine body is still far out of my reach. Achieving ultimate mastery in one world law is already extremely difficult. Not to mention, I also need to create the divine body itself. From the information he inherited, Shifeng already knew what a world law was. The so-called world law was basically a type of advanced usage over the various mana elements. An example would be the Heavenly Blue Saint's mana technique Holy Annihilation. However, only after one could manipulate the various elements of mana at an advanced standard would one master a world law. Simply being able to execute Holy Annihilation didn't cut it. Currently, apart from his inadequate concentration standard, so long as Shifeng collected enough 7 luminaries crystals, he could already get promoted to Tier 6. The Heavenly Blue Saint's world law was the law of destruction, which covered the destruction of everything, even the most basic elements of mana. This was why Shifeng managed to break through the mysterious youth spacetime seal and world severance with Holy Annihilation. Had Holy Annihilation been based on any other world law, he wouldn't have escaped the evil god's secret land with his life. The bottleneck many demigods faced after mastering a world law was in the creation process of a superior divine body. This was because there were many methods to create a superior divine body, with the core principle being the integration of the mastered world law into their divine body. Of course, while this problem was incredibly challenging for others, the difficulty for Shifeng had been reduced significantly. The ancient god's legacy he absorbed recorded a basic flowchart for creating a superior divine body. So long as he followed this flowchart, his success rate would increase by 30 to 40%. One could say that the most important information recorded in the ancient god's legacy was this flowchart. Roughly 90% of the recorded information was related to it. In fact, 90% out of this 90% was the superior divine body's flowchart itself. This was also the amazing aspect of the ancient god's legacy. It was completely different from an ordinary god's legacy. While I currently don't have any methods to improve my concentration, I can focus on achieving ultimate mastery over the law of destruction. Although Shifeng wasn't yet confident of creating a superior divine body, he was optimistic about his chances of gaining ultimate mastery in a world law. After all, he could already utilize holy annihilation. So long as he perfected his use of the technique, he should reach ultimate mastery in the law of destruction. Moreover, his world authority had already reached level 1. He would have a much easier time perfecting the holy annihilation technique than other players. After Shifeng finished processing the information from the ancient god's eye, he took out the divine power source he had obtained. Shifeng grew a little hesitant as he looked at this divine power source. According to the ancient god's legacy, divine power sources were birthed by the world and carried the world's power. They were incredibly useful in helping one understand world laws. In other words, by merging the divine power source with his body using a special technique, he could elevate his world authority. This would, in turn, allow him to understand world laws more easily. The ancient god's legacy also recorded this integration technique. Now that war is imminent, I should prioritize increasing my strength above all else. Gritting his teeth, Shifeng had the light of two worlds absorb the divine power source. Shifeng still wasn't fully confident of defending the Twin Towers Kingdom and Starmoon Kingdom against the Outer World forces. After all, his enemies weren't limited to just the Outer World's players. He also had to face the Outer World's NPCs. While the Outer World NPCs might not have Tier 6 gods in their ranks, they were bound to have quite a few Tier 5 NPCs. And in the case of Tier 5 NPCs, so long as their status in society was sufficiently high, acquiring a legendary weapon or equipment wouldn't be difficult. Take the Branch Temple Lord of Starmoon Kingdom's War God's Temple, for example. Despite being a Tier 4, he owned 2 legendary items. Meanwhile, the difference between having and not having a legendary weapon or equipment was massive for Tier 5 NPCs. Once the light of two worlds perfectly absorbed the icy-cold tree branch Shifeng held, it released a dazzling, golden glow. The divine runes on the weapon's blade also lit up gradually. After several minutes, the divine runes on the sword's blade and hilt connected and became one. Boom! The next moment, the light of two worlds released a pulse of energy that made Shifeng stumble. The magic barrier enveloping the secret room also shuddered violently and nearly crumbled. As expected of one of the 10 great legendary weapons, it's strong. Shifeng was stunned when he read the Light of Two Worlds' details displayed before him. Light of Two Worlds, one-handed sword, legendary rank, equipment requirement, strength 20,000, tier 3 attack power, 450% of strength, attack speed, 4% of agility, all attributes, increases according to the user's level. When equipped, attacks gain the mana annihilation effect, causing a spatial collapse in an area of 4 by 100 yards. Attacks have a 50% chance to deal 300% damage. Attacks have a 20% chance to deal 500% damage. Attacks deal 300% damage to targets under tier 6. Attacks carry the mana destabilization effect. Strength increased by 240%, agility increased by 210%, intelligence increased by 180%, endurance increased by 60%, attack speed increased by 200%. Ignore levels plus 100, all sword type skills plus 2 level, up to tier 6 peak. Power of all attacks increased by 2 ranks, up to Tier 6 peak, effective mana increased by 150%. Additional passive skill World Power increases the user's life rating. Additional active skill 1 Spatial Slash, Tier 6 4/6 attacks, increases strength by 1500%, power by 2 ranks, up to Tier 6 peak rank at maximum, and attack range to 5,000 yards. Cooldown, 30 seconds. Additional active skill 2 Golden Soul, Tier 6 upgrades the user's soul by 1 rank and world authority by 1 level, up to level 3, and reduces concentration consumption by 90%. Duration, 2 minutes. Cooldown, 1 hour. Additional active skill 3 World Breaker, Tier 6 consumes 10% of the user's concentration and mana to enhance the light of 2 worlds, granting the weapon the power to break worlds for 1 attack. Forcibly increases the power of attack by 1 tier, up to Tier 6 peak rank at maximum. Cooldown, 30 minutes. Created by the ancient god of light. The light of 2 worlds possesses the power to cut all things. Looking at the basic attributes the light of 2 worlds provided, Shifeng finally understood why people wielding legendary weapons could transcend tiers. A Tier 3 player wielding this thing could probably beat up Tier 4 players. While holding the light of 2 worlds, Shifeng inadvertently recalled the several heaven-defying feats that had taken place in his previous life. Back then, players who had been lucky enough to get their hands on legendary weapons while still at Tier 3 had actively hunted all sorts of Tier 4 players. While the legendary weapons those players wielded weren't as strong as the light of 2 worlds, the basic attributes those weapons provided had still been more than enough for Tier 3 players to trounce Tier 4 players. Only Tier 4 players with highly developed mana bodies and several fragmented legendary items could contend against a Tier 3 player wielding a legendary weapon. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. After Shifeng equipped the light of 2 worlds, his strength attribute instantly skyrocketed to 190,000. Now, he was only slightly inferior to the average Tier 6 God-ranked player. Now, I can put up a fight even against Tier 6 God-ranked experts. Shifeng's confidence rose as he looked at the weapon in his hand. Now, even if he had to go up against the mysterious youth, he wouldn't be completely powerless to resist. Following this, Shifeng began familiarizing himself with the fully recovered light of 2 worlds. After training for 5 hours, he received a call from Fire Dance. Guild leader, I've found their base camp. They're hiding in the Shadow Forest, outside the Twin Towers Kingdom. Chapter 2901, Wind Rises in Twin Towers. Chapter 2901, Wind Rises in Twin Towers Kingdom, Shadow Forest. A 6-man scouting party led by a level 154, Tier 4 assassin slowly traversed the rainforest. Dark clouds hovered over the Shadow Forest all year round, shrouding the forest in gloom even during hot summer days when the sun shone bright. The mist enveloping the forest also hindered players' perception, and even Tier 3 experts familiar with the terrain would lose their way if they weren't careful. Commander, we've been investigating this place for half a day now, yet we haven't found any traces of the Outer Worlds player army. Should we take a look at the other maps? A blue-clad level 142, Tier 3 assassin suggested as he looked at a tree-lined gorge. With the War of Worlds imminent, many of the Twin Towers Kingdom's player forces had dispatched scouting parties to seize the initiative. Among the scouting party's duties, the top priority was investigating the exact state of the Outer Worlds player army. Many of the Twin Towers Kingdom's forces were offering astronomical prices for the information. If one managed to get detailed information on the Outer Worlds player army, one could receive not only a level 150 epic weapon for the information but also 200,000 credits. Hence, although many independent experts in the kingdom had fled to the Black Dragon Empire and the Dark Knight Empire, adventurer teams from the neighboring kingdoms and empires still dispatched expert players to investigate. The Sand Fox Adventurer Team was one of them. The Sand Fox Adventurer Team was well known in the Dark Knight Empire. Although Sand Fox's overall combat power was nothing noteworthy in the Dark Knight Empire, its scouting ability ranked among the top 10 of the Empire's adventurer teams. After the blue-clad assassin finished speaking, a level 136 assassin youth in the party suddenly jumped off the tree branch he stood on, and stopped moving. He then quietly observed the empty woodland in the distance. The assassin youth's actions alerted the rest of the party, and they promptly halted their advance, not daring to move even a muscle. Blade, is something wrong with that place? The Tier 4 assassin Sky Fox asked quietly as he looked at the assassin youth. The other players in the party also looked at the assassin youth curiously. The assassin youth, Bladeheart, had started playing God's Domain only recently, and his level was the lowest in the party. However, he possessed incredible technique and intuition. Often, he would notice things that even their commander, Sky Fox, had failed to notice. This was why they had brought Bladeheart along on this scouting mission. After studying the empty woodland ahead for a while, Bladeheart said hesitantly, "I can't say for certain, but my gut tells me something is there." "What thing?" Sky Fox scrutinized the empty woodland. However, no matter how Sky Fox looked at the area, he failed to see anything out of the ordinary. Even his high-ranking identification skill didn't come up with anything. That empty woodland was nothing but an ordinary forested region. Let alone players, he couldn't even detect any signs of other creatures. However, several minutes after Sky Fox and the others continued their observation of the empty woodland, they spotted a 20-man team approaching the woodland. This team was incredibly strong. All 20 members were Tier 4 players and also above level 155. The most inferior piece of equipment they wore was level 150 dark gold equipment, and the team leader even had 5 pieces of epic equipment. These people should be one of the Outer World Army's scouting teams. Why are they here instead of investigating the Twin Towers Kingdom? Bladeheart was confused when he saw this 20-man team. The Outer Worlds player army had dispatched a lot of experts to harass and investigate the Twin Towers Kingdom. Many of the expert teams sent were led by Tier 4 experts. The 20-man team they were seeing now was definitely one of the Outer World Army's elite forces. The other players in the party also grew confused and curious about this situation. Logically, a team of such caliber should have been dispatched to investigate the Twin Towers Kingdom's inner regions and even cause a huge commotion in the kingdom. After all, the average player force couldn't contend against such combat power. Only first-rate guilds could possibly take on such a team. While Sky Fox and the others were wondering why this team was in this deserted location, the 20-man team suddenly stopped in the empty woodland. However, none of them got off their mounts. Instead, they simply stood there as if waiting for something. Roughly 10 seconds later, the space of the empty woodland became blurry, and a tear in the space opened up. A magic barrier. Almost all players in God's Domain knew of magic barriers. However, the scene that just took place still stunned Sky Fox and his team. None of them had known that magic barriers could be used in such a manner. Through the gap in the barrier, Sand Fox's members saw an ocean of players. From a rough glance, they could estimate that the barrier hid at least several 100,000 players. Moreover, they spotted many Tier 4 experts among those players. Why are there so many Tier 4 players? It's over. Twin Towers is finish. We won't have enough to defend against so many Tier 4 experts, even if we gather the players from the Black Dragon Empire and Dark Knight Empire. The information those superpowers obtained are completely wrong. The Eastern continent is going to lose at this rate. Bladeheart and the others paled and despaired when they saw the player army in the barrier. Although God's Domain had given birth to many Tier 4 players already, they were still incredibly rare. At this stage of the game, a kingdom was considered top tier if it had at least 300 Tier 4 players operating within its borders. Even the strongest empire didn't have more than 1,500 Tier 4 players operating within it. While these numbers might seem large, the player populations of kingdoms and empires were calculated in the hundreds of millions. There wasn't even one Tier 4 expert for every 100,000 players. Yet, from what they could see, the Outer Worlds player army before them had over 5,000 Tier 4 players. It was capable of destroying even the Black Dragon Empire and Dark Knight Empire, let alone the Twin Towers Kingdom. "Commander, what should we do now?" Bladeheart asked nervously. With so many Tier 4 experts on the Outer Worlds side, the Black Dragon Empire and Dark Knight Empire will definitely fall. Revealing a bitter smile, Sky Fox said, "What can we do? Our only option now is to notify the Black Dragon Empire's and Dark Knight Empire's superpowers and have them gather the neighboring kingdoms and empires' Tier 4 experts. Otherwise, all of us will have to leave the Eastern continent." But will those superpowers listen to us? Blade Heart asked worriedly. Those superpowers are all focused on dealing with Zero Wing now, and they're hoping to see Twin Towers and Star Moon fall. Would they be willing to gather their forces to help defend the Twin Towers Kingdom? That's none of our concern. Helplessly, Sky Fox said, our job now is to spread this information and hope for the best. Truthfully, Sky Fox had already lost hope for the Twin Towers Kingdom. Nevertheless, he still felt that they needed to try defending against the Outer Worlds player army for as long as possible. That way, the Eastern Continent's native Tier 3 players would have more time to get promoted to Tier 4. However, when Sky Fox and his team were about to leave, a loud hum came from the distant sky. When the party sought the noise's origin, what entered their eyes was a crimson behemoth heading in their direction. Zero Wing? Why are they here? Could they have discovered the Outer Worlds player army already? Sky Fox and the others grew confused as they watched the Crimson Dragon flying ship approach. Nowadays, the Crimson Dragon flying ships were synonymous with Zero Wing. Almost no player in God's domain was ignorant of their existence. Now that one of these flying ships had appeared in this deserted location, the only explanation for it was that Zero Wing had discovered the Outer Worlds player army. In no time at all, the Crimson Dragon flying ship arrived and stopped above the empty woodland. Obviously, Zero Wing already knew about the hidden magic barrier. Is Zero Wing planning to attack the Outer World players? Blade Heart wondered as he looked at the flying ship. That's most likely the case, but Zero Wing probably doesn't know how many Tier 4 experts are hidden inside the barrier. It'll definitely suffer a loss afterward, Sky Fox said worriedly when he saw Shifeng walking to the flying ship's bow. The battle at Ancient Rock City had boosted Black Flame's fame. He was publicly recognized as God's domain's strongest player. However, even a Tier 5, Sword Saint stood no chance against a force of more than 5,000 Tier 4 players. After all, a Tier 5 player would still lose a lot of HP if they got hit by a Tier 4 player's attack. Not to mention, these Tier 4 players came to wage war. They most definitely had combination skills and battle arrays prepared. As soon as Sky Fox finished speaking, the magic barrier enveloping the empty woodland suddenly revealed itself. At this time, the Tier 4 magical class players inside the barrier had split into groups of 100 and were casting all sorts of large-scale spells, including Tier 4 defensive spells and offensive spells. These large-scale spells numbering more than a dozen were not the slightest bit weaker than the average Tier 5 defensive spell and offensive spell. A summoning array maintained by 600 players could also be seen in the center of the magic barrier. The summoning array was incredibly complex, making it impossible for outsiders to tell its rank. After these 600 players finished their incantation, the phantom of a 9-headed snake emerged from the ground. Tier 5. That's definitely a Tier 5 legendary monster. Although Sky Fox and his team didn't know what kind of monster the Outer World players had summoned, they could tell that it wasn't just a Tier 4 monster based on its aura. Aside from the rumored Tier 5 legendary monsters, they couldn't think of any other possibility. Facing such a monster, let alone one Tier 5, Sword Saint, even 2 or 3 Tier 5 players working together would fall. Upon seeing this monster, Sky Fox and the others couldn't help revealing looks of bitterness and despair. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EUA force of 5,000 plus Tier 4 experts was already plenty shocking, and it allowed them to realize just how wide the gap between the players of God's domain and of the Outer World was. Yet, reality now told them that the gap was far wider than they thought. The force of 5,000 plus Tier 4 experts was only the tip of the iceberg. However, unlike Sky Fox and his team, Shifeng, aboard the Crimson Dragon flying ship, remained unfazed by this situation. He simply took to the air and arrived above the magic barrier. He then unsheathed the newly upgraded Light of Two Worlds. Disappear. Shifeng brandished the Light of Two Worlds against the barrier. Holy annihilation. Chapter 2902. Power of Tier 6. Chapter 2902. Power of Tier 6. When Shifeng brandished the Light of Two Worlds, a dazzling brilliance replaced the dark clouds overhead, and the sky itself descended to the ground. Boom! 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 A series of deafening explosions rang through the forest, the effects of Shifeng's attack stupefying Sky Fox and the others. With just one attack, Shifeng destroyed all of the Outer World players' offensive spells, as well as the magic barrier protecting the Outer World players. Only after destroying several more defensive spells did the brilliance Shifeng's attack generated begin to dissipate. However, the areas Shifeng's attack passed through were now devoid of mana. Moreover, the resulting shockwave was so powerful that it reached Sky Fox's party several thousand yards away, sending the 6 players smashing into trees and stifling their breath. Isn't he a little too powerful? Sky Fox and the others were at a loss for words as they looked at Shifeng. All of them could tell that Shifeng's attack wasn't a skill but a combat technique. Nevertheless, he had managed to destroy all of the Outer World players' offensive spells and most of their defensive spells. Even the Tier 5 Imperial Knight I saw previously wasn't this strong, Blade Heart exclaimed. Is this the strength of God's Domain's strongest player? Everyone in God's Domain had already gotten a clear look at Shifeng's power during the battle at Ancient Rock City. However, compared to that time, the power Shifeng had just displayed was on a whole other level. The Tier 4 combination defensive spells the Outer World players used rivaled Tier 5 defensive spells in power. Even Tier 5 NPCs needed quite a few attacks to break through a Tier 5 defensive spell. Yet, Shifeng had destroyed multiple Tier 5 offensive and defensive spells with just one attack. Such power was beyond even Tier 5 NPCs. Shifeng was practically a god who had descended to the mortal world. Black flame, is it? Fighting spirit ignited in Blade Heart's eyes as he looked at Shifeng. I'm going to become as strong as him one day. At this time, Sky Fox's party wasn't the only one shocked by Shifeng's display of power. The millions of Outer World players were similarly thunderstruck. What? Why does this world have such a powerful player? He must be a demigod NPC in disguise. Even a Tier 5 player can't destroy so many large-scale defensive spells. Unlike God's Domain's players, the Outer World's players had a considerable understanding of Tier 5 existences. This was because there were already some Outer World players who had attempted to get promoted to Tier 5. Many superpowers had also clashed against Tier 5 legendary monsters before, with some even succeeding in slaying one. As far as the Outer World players knew, Tier 5 players could only hold their ground against legendary monsters. They couldn't solo one. Even experts at the Tier 5 peak standard couldn't. With so many Tier 4 players working together, they could heavily injure even a Tier 5 legendary monster, let alone a Tier 5 player. Hence, what just happened was simply unbelievable. However, unlike most of the Outer World players, the superpower executives in charge of the army reacted much more calmly to this situation. As expected of our primary target this time. I can see why 100 Ghosts is so afraid of him that they did not send anyone over this time, the 4-meter-tall man serving as the army's general said in commendation as he observed Shifeng's hovering figure. No sooner had the giant man finished speaking than the female elf standing beside him said nonchalantly, he might be strong, but he's facing the Weeping God army now. He still isn't qualified to fight us alone. Nobody present rebutted the female elf's words. Some of them even revealed excited expressions. 9-player armies had crossed the world passage this time, every one of them established by the various superpowers. The Weeping God army was one of these 9 armies, and heading it was Land of Gods, one of their God's Domain's 7 great guilds, with the support of 4 other superpowers. And out of the 9-player armies, the Weeping God army ranked 3rd in strength. The reason behind the Weeping God army's name was its successful slaying of an ancient demigod, an existence far stronger than even Tier 5 legendary monsters. This brilliant achievement was also why the Weeping God army had accepted the task of taking down Zero Wing's supporting kingdoms. All right. Although it is a little early, we'll summon the 9-headed world snake, the general said. He then turned to the female elf surrounded by dense bloodlust and said, Wind, join the fight with your group as well. Let this world's natives know our power. Land of Gods had brought out their precious 9-snake summoning array to let all of God's Domain's forces know of its power. This summoning array was also the main reason the Weeping God army had managed to slay an ancient demigod. However, one had to pay a colossal price for each use of the summoning array, and it could be used only 4 times. Moreover, Controlling the 9-headed world snake summoned was incredibly challenging. The task required 9 players with excellent control over mana and 1 player with remarkable control over their physical body, in other words, an existence at the beyond domain realm. Anyone weaker than that would have difficulty controlling the world snake's gigantic body. The female elf named Nightmarish Wind nodded and led 9 Tier 4 experts with incredibly powerful mana domains to the summoning array. All 10 of them then jumped into the illusory 9-headed snake's body. Immediately, the illusory 9-headed snake grew more tangible. Its size also increased. In just 3 seconds, the 9-headed snake's body, which originally measured around 100 meters in length, had grown to 1,000 meters. Each of its 9 heads had also enlarged to the size of mountains. Moreover, each of these heads now held mastery over a particular magical element, and they could independently cast spells of their respective element. Black Flame. I heard you're this world's strongest player. Nightmarish Wind, who was hidden inside the world snake's translucent body, sneered when she saw Shifeng still standing his ground. Unfortunately, you're not going to leave this place alive today. After saying so, Nightmarish Wind had the world snake fly toward Shifeng. The power its body exuded was so strong that the space in its path shattered. Simultaneously, the world snake's 9 heads cast 9 different Tier 5 spells and launched them at Shifeng. This scene made Sky Fox and his team shudder in fear. The current 9-headed world snake radiated a much more powerful aura than before, so much so that it felt like a completely different creature. Even the Tier 5 NPCs they had come across previously couldn't compare to this monster. Meanwhile, in front of the world snake, Shifeng looked like an ant, as if the world snake could wipe him out of existence with a single swipe of its tail. The simultaneous bombardment of 9 Tier 5 spells was something even several Tier 5 NPCs working together would fail to stop. However, even after seeing the world snake's attack, Shifeng remained unfazed. He simply raised the Light of Two Worlds once more and swung it at the world snake. World Breaker. Boom. For an instant, everyone on the battlefield felt the world around them disappear. Apart from an empty space filled with light, they could neither see nor feel anything around them. Everyone gradually recovered their senses, and once they did, they couldn't help gaping in shock, their minds going blank. Gone. The 9-headed world snake is gone. Moreover, the 9-headed world snake wasn't the only thing that disappeared. A significant part of the vast forest had also disappeared, and in its place was a crater over 4,000 yards in diameter, with the endless void in its depths. From the sky, it would seem as if something had just taken a bite out of the shadow forest. This sight rendered every surviving member of the Weeping God army speechless. Even the army's general couldn't bring himself to say anything for a long time. After all, Shifeng's strike didn't kill just the 9-headed world snake but also over a quarter of the Weeping God army. After falling into a daze for over a dozen seconds, the Outer World Army's general inhaled deeply and yelled with all his might, "Run! Everyone, run immediately! He's no longer human." This shout snapped the Weeping God Army's surviving members out of their daze, and they began scattering and fleeing frantically. As for the general himself, he took out a Tier 4 instantaneous movement scroll and teleported out of the area immediately. He had no intention of lingering for even a moment longer. Meanwhile, when Shifeng looked at the vast abyss in the middle of the forest, he couldn't help sighing ruefully. No wonder Tier 6 players rarely fought on the main continent. If 2 Tier 6 players clashed, they could probably erase an entire empire from the continent. World Breaker wasn't an AE skill. Even so, it had still wreaked such damage on the Shadow Forest's terrain. This was something Shifeng never expected. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After dealing a devastating blow to the Outer World Army, Shifeng showed no interest in hunting down the fleeing players. That would simply be too tedious. Moreover, his attack had killed at least 70% of the Outer World Army's Tier 4 players, allowing him to level up to level 174. It was easy to surmise just how many Tier 4 and Tier 3 players he had killed. Meanwhile, players killed by a Tier 6 attack wouldn't be able to log into the game for some time. Even if a Tier 6 attack didn't specifically target the soul, it would still cause significant damage to souls. Hence, Players killed by Tier 6 attacks would get barred from the game for some time, and their souls would fall into a weakened state for 5 or 6 days afterward. Shi Feng flew back to the Crimson Dragon flying ship and returned to Sky Spring City, leaving behind the fleeing Outerworld army and the stupefied members of Sky Fox's party in the Shadow Forest. "Commander, what should we do? What else can we do? Hurry up and spread this information. We'll most likely need to rely on Zero Wing for this war of world." Chapter 2903, Fame Shakes God's Domain. Chapter 2903, Fame Shakes God's Domain. Dark Knight Empire, Winter Night Border Fortress. With the opening of the Second War of Worlds, the Outerworld's NPC army had appeared at the borders of many of the Eastern Continent's kingdoms and empires. Although no full-blown battles had taken place yet, many skirmishes had occurred already. Guild leader Lu, I'm afraid things will be troublesome this time. The Outerworld's NPC army is much larger than we anticipated. Although the Outerworld player army we have to deal with is much smaller than those at the other empires, we'll still face a tough fight, even if we work together with the Empire's army. Hidden Cloud, the 5th floor master of the Super Guild 9 Heavens Pavilion, said with a frown as he read the latest report on the Outerworld's NPC army. If we can't even hold our side, there's no need to mention pushing back the Outerworld's NPC army and taking Zero Wing's 2 cities in the Orc Empire. During the First War of Worlds, both sides had gathered all their forces at one location for a decisive battle. However, the Outerworld's NPC army had acted differently this time, splitting into several dozen smaller groups and invading multiple kingdoms and empires simultaneously. Many of their targets were even empires holding strategic locations on the eastern continent. The forces the Outerworld NPCs had invested into this second war were on a whole other level compared to before. Thus, many of the eastern continent's kingdoms and empires had no choice but to focus on defending their own territory. In this situation, even if the Twin Towers Kingdom and Starmoon Kingdom fell, Starlink and its several allied superpowers wouldn't be able to get the eastern continent's various kingdoms and empires to retake Starmoon Kingdom. And if Starmoon Kingdom remained in the Outerworld NPC's hands, taking Zero Wing's lost ancient Rock City and Silverwing City would also be impossible. You can rest assured, Brother Cloud. According to the information I got, the several kingdoms neighboring the Dark Knight Empire that aren't under attack are already mobilizing their troops to the Dark Knight Empire, Lu Tiendi said, assuaging Hidden Cloud's worries. Once these kingdoms' armies arrive, combined with the players we have here, defending against the Outerworld's NPC army shouldn't be difficult. As for Zero Wing's 2 guild cities, it doesn't matter even if we can't acquire them fully as planned. Once the Twin Towers Kingdom falls, Zero Wing will have to beg us to help defend Starmoon Kingdom to keep those 2 cities. At that time, let alone obtaining shares to those 2 guild cities, we might even be able to acquire shares for Zero Wing City. After hearing Lu Tiendi's words, Hidden Cloud nodded in agreement. Although there was a slight change to their plans, the overall situation remained in their favor. The Dark Knight Empire had an advantage in players over the Outerworld army, so it wouldn't be difficult to repel the enemy. After all, players did not fear death, unlike NPCs. Moreover, the Dark Knight Empire had opened its treasury to players this time. Players fighting for the Empire would receive contribution points if they managed to kill the Outerworld NPCs, and these points could be exchanged for weapons and equipment. Hence, the Empire's players no longer had to worry about running out of weapons and equipment. The only uncertainty left in their plan now was Zero Wing's decision. Zero Wing could either choose to monopolize Zero Wing City's benefits and abandon Starmoon Kingdom and its 2 guild cities in the Orc Empire, or give away a portion of Zero Wing City's benefits to secure Starmoon Kingdom and those 2 guild cities. However, just when Lu Tiendi, Hidden Cloud, and the other superpowers executives present were about to continue discussing how to proceed in the current situation, a commotion suddenly erupted among the Winter Night Fortress's players. Moreover, it grew louder and louder as more time passed. This situation confused Lu Tiendi and the others, who were holding a meeting atop the fortress's wall. Guild leader, something big happened. Suddenly, a middle-aged man approached the group of executives hurriedly and arrived before Lu Tiendi. This person was none other than Yi Kuei, Lu Tiendi's butler. At this time, Yi Kuei had an anxious expression, his usual composure nowhere in sight. What happened? Why are you in such a hurry? Lu Tiandi asked in dissatisfaction as he looked at Yi Kuei. As his butler and secretary in the guild, Yi Kuei could be considered a representative of Starlink. Yi Kuei was simply embarrassing Starlink by displaying such uncouth behavior in front of the various superpowers executives. Yi Kuei hesitated to speak as he looked at the various representatives present. From Yi Kuei's hesitancy, Lu Tiandi understood that his butler had something very important to tell him. He then said, "If you can't say it, send the information to me." Immediately, Yi Kuei forwarded the relevant information to Lu Tiandi. Although this situation piqued the various executives' curiosity, none of them said anything about Lu Tiandi and Yi Kuei's exchange. After all, every guild had its secrets. However, roughly 10 seconds after Lu Tiandi began reading the information Yi Kuei provided, his expression changed drastically. He even failed to control himself and shouted his thoughts. Impossible. Lu Tiandi's loss of composure surprised the various superpowers executives. Lu Tiandi had criticized Yi Kuei for the latter's loss of composure just a moment ago, yet he was now behaving even worse than Yi Kuei. Just when the various superpowers executives were about to ask Lu Tiandi what information he had received, they suddenly received a message from their respective subordinates. The content of the message was simple, and it even came with a battle video attached. When the various executives played the battle video, what first entered their eyes was a man swinging a sword at one of the Outer Worlds player armies. However, the next moment, both a gigantic 9-headed snake and over 1/4 of the player army vanished along with a significant portion of the forest. Afterward, the remaining Outer World players scattered and fled the area. As for the man, he returned to the flying ship behind him and departed the area as well. A Crimson Dragon flying ship? Is he Black Flame? Questions and shock flooded the heads of the various superpowers executives. All of them were Tier 4 players, so despite the battle video's brevity, their eyes still managed to take note of every little detail in it. Although they couldn't see the 9-headed snake's information, based on the spatial fluctuations surrounding it, the monster was undoubtedly at the Tier 5 legendary rank. They also counted at least 4,000 Tier 4 players in the Outer Worlds player armor, far more than what any single empire on the eastern continent had faced so far. Yet, Shifeng had not only killed the Tier 5 legendary monster with one attack but also defeated the army of millions. After several minutes of silence, the various superpowers executives snapped out of their daze one after another. However, their earlier complacency was nowhere to be seen, replaced by solemn expressions. Guild Leader Lu, I still have something to do, so I'll be taking my leave first. Guild Leader Lu, my superior suddenly called me back for a meeting, so excuse me. Guild Leader Lu. The next moment, the various superpowers executives gave all sorts of excuses and left the fortress in quick succession. Even Hidden Cloud, Lu Tiandi's staunch supporter, suddenly said he felt ill and logged out of the game to rest. In no time at all, only Lu Tiandi and Yi Kuei remained on the fortress's wall. Yi Kuei's complexion turned livid as he watched the various superpowers executives leave. He then asked Lu Tiandi, "What should we do now, young master?" The strength Shifeng displayed had already thoroughly exceeded their imagination. After the battle in the Shadow Forest, Yi Kuei could already foresee the Outer Worlds players abandoning their attack on the Twin Towers Kingdom and Star Moon Kingdom. Since the Outer Worlds NPC army had split into several dozen groups, mainly targeting the various empires, Zero Wing should have no problem defending the Twin Towers Kingdom. Not to mention, Shifeng could solo Tier 5 legendary monsters. So long as he didn't foolishly rush into the NPC army's base camp, killing the Outer Worlds NPCs would be a cakewalk for him. In contrast to Zero Wing's situation, Starlink's situation was absolutely abysmal. If they went by the reactions of the various superpowers executives, these superpowers intended to abandon Starlink. We haven't lost yet, Lu Tiandi said as he sent a cold glare at Yi Kuei. Black Flame is the core of everything. So long as we deal with Black Flame, everything else will be simple. But Black Flame's strength is extraordinary. The Grandmasters the various corporations sent last time are still lying in the hospital, Yi Kuei said. Yi Kuei had received a fright when he heard this news back then. That was a force of 14 half-step Grandmaster and Grandmaster level expert. Yet, these experts had actually lost. Moreover, according to them, Shifeng had defeated them all by himself. The strength he wielded was simply unbelievable. Moreover, the Grandmasters in the group even judged that Shifeng was most likely a mental strength master already. A mental strength master was an existence Starlink couldn't afford to offend, no matter what. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU at best, he has just become a mental strength master. He is still far from a match for my teacher, Lu Tiandi said coldly. I don't know what happened, but my teacher suddenly became interested in God's domain recently and now wants to gain control over a powerful force in God's domain. He even told me to figure out a way to do so. My original plan was to annex Zero Wing for myself, but seeing as that's not possible now, I can give it to my teacher instead. With Zero Wing's current influence and resources, there's no way my teacher won't be interested. Moreover, Black Flame even got my senior brother kicked out of the upper zone. Given my teacher's personality, he will deal with Black Flame, even if Black Flame is now a mental strength master. Lu Tiandi no longer held any hope of annexing Zero Wing's resources. Nevertheless, he couldn't let Shifeng off the hook so easily. After Lu Tiandi finished speaking, he assigned some tasks to Yi Kuei and logged off to contact his teacher. In the meantime, the various powers of God's domain had also received news of Shifeng defeating one of the Outer World's player armies. The superpowers were shaken for a time, and their fear of Zero Wing skyrocketed. Some superpowers even began planning to convey good intentions to Zero Wing. However, Shifeng wasn't present in God's domain to receive any of these good intentions, as he had promptly logged out of the game after returning to Sky Spring City. This was because today was the day he would receive his large mansion. Chapter 2904, Changing Times. Chapter 2904, Changing Times. Yuantian City's Upper Zone, Base Layer, Upper Class Mansion District. Brother She, I really have to congratulate you this time. This large mansion is the last one available in the base layer. You probably can't get another one in Yuantian City's upper zone even if you want to in the future, Hanifeng said when he saw Shifeng registering himself as the owner of the mansion in front of him. Looking at the three-story mansion, which occupied an area as large as half a football field, he couldn't repress his envy as he said, "You're only one of 3 people to own a large mansion as an individual in Yuantian City's upper zone." The base layer's 10 large mansions didn't just have the best position and environment. They also served as a status symbol. The only reason Hanifeng got to stay in a large mansion himself was his status as the 5 States Corporation's heir. The other members of his family, even those with excellent performance, could stay in the large mansion for only a short period. In comparison, Shifeng had purchased a large mansion all by himself. Moreover, he wouldn't have any people disturbing his peace. The heirs and heads of the base layer's various corporations would be green with envy once they heard about this. The last one? Shifeng was a little surprised. Weren't there 2 left before? Did someone buy the other one during this time? They concluded the purchase yesterday, Hanifeng said, nodding. Sighing ruefully, he continued, moreover, you might very well know the person who bought it. I know them. Shifeng grew even more surprised. There were only 10 large mansions in the base layer. Even a powerful organization like the Boulder Corporation didn't have the ability to purchase one. He found it truly hard to imagine that any of his acquaintances did. You might not know her in real life, but you've probably heard of her in God's domain, Hanifeng said, chuckling. Does the name Endless Scars or Wei Yang Qian Hen, 1, ring any bells? The Midnight Tea Party she belongs to is currently the target of recruitment of even the 5 great super guilds. Rumors say that she has already developed her mana body to the 120% completion rate, and she can probably get promoted to Tier 5 at any time. It's her. Shifeng was startled. He had a general idea of Endless Scars' identity. He was sure that she was the princess of a major corporation and that she might live in the upper zone. However, he never thought that Endless Scars would hold such great strength in the upper zone that she could afford a large mansion. It seems you do know her. Looking at Shifeng's surprised expression, Hanifeng smiled and said, she's quite something. You can even say that she's astounding. She managed to buy that mansion this time not because of her family but because her senior brother gifted it to her. Gifted? Shifeng was flabbergasted. He had spent a lot of 7 luminaries crystals to purchase a large mansion, and he didn't know how much time he would need to collect so many crystals again. That's right. It's because she has incredible talent. A big shot in the middle layer recently took her in as his student. I heard that this big shot even paid a high price to borrow a middle layer reserve slot for her to help her break through to mental strength master, Hanifeng said, a hint of envy appearing in his eyes. I have to admit that her talent is truly astonishing. She's been labeled the best talent Yuantian City's upper zone has seen in the past 100 years. Once she reaches the middle layer, she'll probably take only a few months to become a mental strength master. And with her talent, beauty, and a middle layer big shot supporting her, she naturally became the target of pursuit of many of the upper zone's youths. One of them is Qin Baiyi, her senior brother. Qin Baiyi is also an extraordinary talent. He successfully broke through and became a mental strength master 2 years ago, the youngest mental strength master in Yuantian City's upper zone in the past 20 years. Because Wei Yang Qianhen arrived at Yuantian City's upper zone only recently, Qin Baiyi bought a large mansion as a temporary residence for her to adapt to the lifestyle here. Having spoken up to this point, Hanifeng, who was normally indifferent to his surroundings, betrayed some yearning for the woman named Wei Yang Qianhen. After all, mental strength masters were incredibly rare, and a beautiful mental strength master was rarer. However, before Hanifeng could fantasize for long, Shifeng interrupted him, asking, "Young Master Han, do I need to go through any procedures to let other people live in this mansion long term?" Fang Shahan had transferred 10 upper zone reserve slots, and he had already assigned them to Fire Dance and the others. The ordinary housing unit he had couldn't accommodate them all. Meanwhile, one would enjoy vastly different treatment depending on whether one had housing or not. A housing status didn't just signify that one had lodging, it also determined the exercise equipment and food one could gain access to, among other things. Those without housing could only enjoy the most common training facilities and food. If one wished to eat better food or rent the upper zone's high-tech training facilities, one needed to have housing status. There are some, Hanifeng said, nodding. All you need to do is register their identities at the Green God Tower. If you're not familiar with anyone there, you can come with me. It so happens that I also need to register someone to my mansion. At this point, Hanifeng no longer dared underestimate Shifeng. In fact, he had even begun placing great importance on Shifeng. Shifeng's defeating multiple Honglian grandmasters all by himself aside, just the position and resources Zero Wing currently held in God's domain already made the guild worthy of befriending for the upper zone's various organizations. After all, 7 luminaries crystals couldn't be acquired easily in God's domain. "I'll have to trouble you then, young Master Han," Shifeng said. Although Shifeng understood Hanifeng's motives, he didn't reject the other party's goodwill. His partnership with Hanifeng might be a long-term one, as he was severely lacking in resources and trade points. Meanwhile, the 5 States Corporation possessed great influence in Yuantian City's upper zone. There should be a lot of things they could partner on in the future. Following this, Hanifeng gave Shifeng a rundown on the basics of the large mansion. Then, the two made their way to the Green God Tower. The Green God Tower's lobby was as crowded as ever. Members of corporations and internal members of the Green God Company were lined up, waiting to exchange for various potions. These people easily numbered over 1,000, and more were still joining the line. The situation at the housing registration counter wasn't the slightest bit inferior, either. When Shifeng and Hanifeng entered the exchange center, a young and beautiful girl wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt and denim shorts noticed them. She immediately strode over with her long legs and approached them in a sprightly manner. Upon seeing the approaching girl, Hanifeng turned to Shifeng and said, "This is my younger cousin, Han Rongrong. The family recently decided to have her live in the mansion because of her talent." When Shifeng saw the lively girl in front of him, he was somewhat surprised. Firstly, it was because of Han Rongrong's talent. From what he could tell, the girl was only around 16 or 17 years old, yet she had already reached the half-step Honglian Grandmaster standard. Secondly, It was because Han Rongrong's appearance resembled the famous Chaos Witch of his previous life. Although Chaos Witch was labeled a witch, she didn't actually play a magical class in God's domain. Instead, she was a guardian knight. Unlike Gentle Snow and Phoenix Rain, who had risen to fame early on in God's domain, Chaos Witch had joined God's domain 2 years after its launch. However, her rise was rapid, getting promoted to Tier 5 in less than 2 years. She had also become one of God's domain's 12 sacred guardian knights and had been only half a step away from getting promoted to Tier 6. Hello. My name is Han Rongrong. I heard a lot about you from my cousin. He says you're very strong. If there's an opportunity, we must have a spar with each other, Han Rongrong said as she looked at Shifeng with eyes sparkling with curiosity and fighting spirit. Rongrong, stop messing around. Brother Shi can defeat even Honglian grandmasters. Someone who isn't even a Honglian grandmaster has no business challenging him, Han Ifeng said as he glared at Han Rongrong. After taking a deep breath, he continued, let's head to the VIP hall to get the residence registration done. However, Han Rongrong paid no heed to Han Ifeng's scolding. She even made a funny face at Han Ifeng. While following behind her cousin, she quietly observed Shifeng, the rumored extraordinary expert. The Green God Tower's VIP hall, located on the 22nd floor, was dedicated to receiving people of a certain status in the base layer. The base layer's average resident couldn't come here even if they wanted to. Only heirs of major corporations like Han Ifeng had the qualifications to do so. However, the so-called VIP hall wasn't anything special. It merely functioned as a specialized housing registration center. VIPs seeking to exchange for points and items still had to line up downstairs like everyone else. When Han Ifeng, Shifeng, and Han Rongrong entered the VIP hall, they found it nearly empty. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. However, upon seeing a group of 5 in the hall, Han Ifeng couldn't help tensing up. Of the 5, 4 were male, and 1 was female. 3 of the 4 males were the top 3 rankers of the current contribution competition, while the last was a young man clad in white. As for the female, she was a beautiful young woman in a blue dress with an indifferent expression. Currently, the 4 males surrounded the woman. This woman was none other than Wei Yang Qianhen, or Endless Scars, the person Han Ifeng mentioned earlier. When Shifeng's group entered the hall, Wei Yang Qianhen shifted her gaze toward them. Before Shifeng and the others could react, she suddenly made her way toward them, causing Han Ifeng to widen his eyes in shock. Shifeng, right? Or should I call you Guild Leader Black Flame? Wei Yang Qianhen said, smiling faintly as she took in Shifeng's dazed expression. You deceived me so badly before. Chapter 2905, High-Grade Authority. Chapter 2905, High-Grade Authority. When Wei Yang Qianhen finished speaking, both the men tagging along with her and Han Ifeng turned to look at Shifeng in disbelief. Wei Yang Qianhen's tone was gentle. Although her words sounded reproachful, they were actually intimate. Han Ifeng found this situation particularly unbelievable. He looked at Shifeng as if he was looking at a monster, his mouth nearly failing to close properly. Wei Yang Qianhen currently enjoyed a lofty position in Yuantian City's upper zone, far out of even the 5 states corporation's reach. Many youths in Yuantian City's upper zone could only dream of getting acquainted with Wei Yang Qianhen, let alone having her strike up a conversation with them. Previously, when Han Ifeng spoke with Shifeng about Wei Yang Qianhen, he thought Shifeng only knew of the woman's existence. After all, the Midnight Tea Party was extremely famous in God's domain as one of the best adventurer teams in the game. Anyone with a reliable information network in God's domain would have heard of it. Han Ifeng never thought that the two of them were actually acquaintances and shared a good relationship. Meanwhile, in response to Wei Yang Qianhen's questioning, Shifeng smiled bitterly and said, "It seems I've made a fool of myself in front of Miss Wei Yang. However, I was forced by circumstances to hide my true identity back then." "You sure know how to act mature," Wei Yang Qianhen said sourly. Previously, she had thought Shifeng was older than her, at least in his 30s, which explained how he came to possess such incredible strength. Afterward, she had constantly thought of surpassing Shifeng one day, going as far as to leave the midnight tea party for a long period to train like crazy. After all, Shifeng had given her a lot of surprises during their initial meeting. She never thought a person could become so powerful. However, just when she thought she was catching up to Shifeng, she received a shocking piece of news. Black Flame's true identity was actually that of a young man who wasn't even 25. Moreover, he was a bona fide self-made expert who didn't possess the slightest bit of background or expert guidance. She had fallen into depression for quite some time after learning about this. Shifeng laughed blankly at Wei Yang Qianhen's comment. In reality, it wasn't wrong to say that he was a man in his 30s. After all, he had been one when he reincarnated. It's been a while since we met, and it seems you've undergone an amazing transformation. You're now a celebrity in Yuantian City's upper zone. Me? That's where you are wrong. Wei Yang Qianhen shook her head. She then pointed at the white-clad youth nearby and said, I'd better introduce you to my senior brother. When Wei Yang Qianhen said the word senior brother, she deliberately emphasized the word senior, causing the white-clad youth to smile bitterly before walking over. And this is... When Shifeng looked at Qin Baiyi, he found the white-clad youth somewhat familiar. He felt as if he had met the other party somewhere before, yet he couldn't recall where. Hello, Guild Leader Black Flame. We meet again, Qin Baiyi greeted with a smile. Again? Have we met before? Shifeng grew confused when he saw Qin Baiyi greeting him like an old acquaintance. Of course you've met. He likes to act mature, exactly like you. Wei Yang Qianhen said as she glared at Qin Baiyi, gritting her teeth slightly. Smiling awkwardly, Qin Baiyi said, Let me introduce myself. You can call me by my real name, Qin Baiyi. You can also call me by my game ID, Breeze Wine. Breeze Wine? You're Breeze Wine? Shifeng was startled when he heard Qin Baiyi's words. Breeze Wine was the midnight tea party's commander, someone Shifeng had met and was relatively familiar with. However, the white-clad youth in front of him had a completely different look and bearing from Breeze Wine's wildness and boldness. While Shifeng was feeling surprised, Hanifeng, who stood beside him, was deeply shocked. Qin Baiyi was not only a mental strength master but also the youngest mental strength master in Yuantian City's upper zone. Who would have thought that a mental strength master was actually the commander of a 20-man adventurer team? Yet, God's Domain's various super first-rate guilds and super guilds had ignorantly used threats against the Midnight Tea Party to recruit the adventurer team. Those superpowers were simply tired of living. Don't mind it, Qin Baiyi said awkwardly when he saw the surprise on Shifeng's face. I wasn't hiding it. Playing God's Domain is just one of my hobbies. After hearing Qin Baiyi's introduction, Shifeng finally understood how Wei Yang Qianhen managed to catch the eye of a middle-layer big shot. It was very likely due to Qin Baiyi's introduction. Shifeng also understood why the Midnight Tea Party wasn't afraid of the various superpowers and could continue existing all this time. With Qin Baiyi's status, which superpower in God's Domain would dare offend him? Seeing Shifeng in deep thought, Qin Baiyi took the initiative to say, Guild Leader Black Flame, you and your friends must be here to register your housing status as well, right? We are also here to deal with housing matters. Why don't we get it done together? I'll be in your care, then, Shifeng said, accepting the offer. There were still a few people lined up, waiting to get their business done in the hall. If Qin Baiyi was willing to help expedite the procedure, it was naturally good news for Shifeng. After all, the sooner he got gentle snow and aqua rose into the large mansion, the sooner he could alleviate the stress on their mind. Naturally, Hanifeng also didn't refuse the offer. He wanted nothing more than to establish a connection with Qin Baiyi right now. Although the Five States Corporation had a solid foundation in the base layer, the influence the corporation held in the upper zone was still insignificant compared to Qin Baiyi's. If Hanifeng could get acquainted with Qin Baiyi now, he would have an easier time when he entered the middle layer. After all, the middle layer wasn't an easy place to survive in. The competition there was even fiercer than in the base layer. Subsequently, the group had all its needs taken care of in less than 10 minutes. When the group arrived at the Green God Tower's entrance and was about to part ways, a commotion erupted from the street outside. The next moment, a maglev car suddenly descended from the sky and landed in front of the entrance, catching the attention of all the nearby pedestrians. Although the upper zone allowed residents to drive their own cars, that was limited to road use. Cars were prohibited from flying. The only ones allowed to do so were people with very high status in the upper zone. After the maglev car parked in front of the Green God Tower's entrance, two people, one young and one old, emerged from it. The young man was none other than Lu Tiendi, Starline Corporation's current heir. However, Lu Tiendi showed none of his usual arrogance, standing humbly and respectfully behind the black-robed elderly man. At this old man's appearance, many of the corporation heirs present gasped reflexively. Han Ifeng's expression even paled when he saw the man. Why would he come here personally? Han Ifeng's eyes were filled with disbelief as he looked at the approaching black-clad elder. This was because the black-clad old man was none other than the Infinity Master of Haitian City's upper zone, a mental strength master holding 2-star high-grade authority in the upper zone. In the upper zone, the Green God Company would award anyone who had become mental strength masters with high-grade authority and permanent residence in the upper zone's middle layer. However, as mental strength masters were not equal, high-grade authority was also categorized into different ranks, from 1 star to 3 stars. Most mental strength masters in the upper zone held only 1-star high-grade authority, with only a small number holding 2-star high-grade authority. For 2-star authority holders, their position in the middle layer rivaled the middle layer's general managers. The Green God Company awarded those who reached 2-star authority with 1 permanent reserve slot for the middle layer and the authority to banish disrespectful mental strength masters from the upper zone for a duration of 1 to 3 years. Meanwhile, Han Ifeng knew that the Infinity Master, Fu Jiuzhong, held a slight grudge against Shifeng. However, in his opinion, someone like Fu Jiuzhong had no reason to take action personally. At most, the Infinity Master would send some of his subordinates to harass Shifeng. Doing more wouldn't be befitting of his status. Yet, contrary to Han Ifeng's expectations, Fu Jiuzhong had made a personal visit to Yuantian City's upper zone. After arriving before Shifeng, Fu Jiuzhong demanded with a lofty aura, "Are you Shifeng? The one who caused my student, Wang Xianming, to get kicked out of the upper zone?" When Fu Jiuzhong finished speaking, the surrounding passers-by couldn't help looking at Shifeng with pity. At the same time, they also wondered who Shifeng was to warrant the Infinity Master's direct intervention. Moreover, based on Fu Jiuzhong's tone, if this situation wasn't handled properly, he might very well utilize his authority to banish Shifeng from the upper zone for some time. And once outside the safe zone known as the upper zone, Shifeng was unlikely to keep his life. At this time, Qin Bai stepped forward with a smile and said, "Master Fu, this person here is my friend. Is there perhaps a misunderstanding here?" "Misunderstanding? I don't think so." Glancing at Qin Bai, Fu Jiuzhong said, "Also, you'd best not interfere in this matter. I don't care, even if you have your teacher's support. Master Fu, although you have 2-star high-grade authority, this is Yuantian City's upper zone," Qin Bai said with a solemn look. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qin Bai felt a little helpless against Fu Jiuzhong right now. He was but an entry mental strength master, no match for a veteran like Fu Jiuzhong. Only his teacher could possibly put up a fight against the Infinity Master. After all, the 2-star high-grade authority wasn't just a status symbol for a mental strength master, it also symbolized strength. So what? Fu Jiuzhong sneered. "Let alone you, even if your teacher personally shows up now, I still won't give a damn. You." Qin Bai was helpless at the moment. If Fu Jiuzhong intended to abuse his authority now, Bai Qini wouldn't be able to do anything about it with only his 1-star high-grade authority. After all, these were the Green God Company's rules. As for what kind of excuse Fu Jiuzhong would give to get the Green God Company to banish Shifeng from the upper zone, he could simply trump up random offenses. However, as Qin Bai was thinking of how to buy time and get his teacher to come and help, Shifeng suddenly stepped forward. "Wang Xianming, is it?" Looking at Fu Jiuzhong, Shifeng responded neither humbly nor arrogantly, "If you're talking about that home intruder, I am indeed the one who handed him over to the Green God Company. May I know what guidance you have to provide, Master Fu?" You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.